It's surprising that we have an entire measurement system based off a game that's failed. It's called a Concord, right? But the problem is we have a Concord 1, which was the first one. Then you had Concord 2, which is Highguard. And then there's Concord 3, which is Marathon. And then Concord 4. But there's never really degrees of failure. It's just, oh, it's yet another Concord. I remember back in the day when like sequels would come out of a lot of games, prequels and sequels, but predominantly sequels. And they'd get a lot of people playing because it's a like the previous game was good, which had a lot of player retention because you're like, well, I'm wondering if this is going to be a continuation of a story because games had that back then. Today's generation will never understand good stories. But games back then had good stories, and unfortunately, some ended up being bad. Some games were like, the one game was perfect. But then, whatever company, predominantly EA was very into, ringing IPs and ringing studios of as much as they can produce, then completely shutting down the studio and living off the whatever dividends the project would come in. But now we're at this odd situation because back then you could pull the wool over the gamer's eyes and be like, oh, well, we can treat our consumers like they're a resource that we can pull from anytime. But then they really hammered that into the mindset of the gamer because you understand the mindset of the gamer. Like back then, you played games against the odds, against cultural odds because games were for children, against the political odds because if you played games on one side you were a mass shooter or like a fucking serial killer, or on the other side you're racist, sexist. Being a gamer is the most, yeah, pretty much the most oppressed class. And now that you're getting older, you can't play games as much because you got responsibilities. You gotta provide, and you probably have a family, a loving wife and kids, and a job. So whatever little time you have, you want to play a game, and then you look at the game and you get this shit, unintuitive, unimportant, uninspiring uh, game and a gameplay, and people they should really thank Jeff Keighley because if without Jeff Keighley announcing this shit at the end of the video games awards, it probably would have got like what 50 people playing, and that's it. But we should thank Jeff Keighley because a lot of people are now getting views off this colossal failure. And people say that, oh, we're tired of hero shooters. And again, this is in the wake of like Marvel Rivals or like Deadlock Protocol. And I'm hearing Overwatch is reverting back, which is the best decision Blizzard has ever made in the past like couple of years. It's like they had the magnum opus of a game. They could have literally just added more characters that were hot and other mechanics, but they decided not to. They decided to shit all over their game because apparently Blizzard is ran by middle-aged women and not, the smelly fat gamers that actually made better products. So now we're in this position where, okay, you have this this consumer consciousness in your head and this ability to point out failed games just by looking at the trailer. And again, a lot of people fail to understand this. You know, people have yet to develop this ability to tell if a game is going to fail just by looking at it. But if you need me to teach you, right, I can. It's simple, but it's one of those things that you're not allowed to say out loud because people care more about how others perceive them instead of, the reality. And the reality is, well, let's just look at Deadlock Protocol and Marvel Rivals in the first Overwatch, right? What did they have? They were made by, they had established companies, established IPs. Well, Overwatch was made by Blizzard, which was huge. Marvel Rivals, they're made by a Chinese company, but Marvel. Deadlock Protocol was made by Valve. The established companies or IPs, they had appealing looking characters, right? A vibrant art style. Again, I'm looking at this and I'm just looking at like bland gray, like this photo alone does not really appeal. Like you have the guy riding the bear, which I guess this is cool. Overwatch had hot female characters. Like, do we need to go any further than this? I mean, we know like the gamer knows the benchmark of a good hero shooter because they're good hero shooters in the past. I mean, I'll give this game this. It had some good mechanics, and at least you could say it functioned. When you could find people to play with, and in this situation, people that played the game were like, yeah, this game is bad. I don't want to play it anymore. But now we're coming into the same old, the same old song and dance of studio releases bad game that they know is going to be bad. And then they hit layoffs. Size was 51 to 200 employees. It's like, this layoffs is not a sign of a healthy company, or of a healthy project. And you also got to understand a game like this was probably proposed 3, 4, 5 years before, and they're rolling off of that now. That maybe they made changes, but I mean, I doubt it. Like, there's very few changes that can be made on Blue Sky map for so whatever the fuck from Kerr, whatever the fuck. Tracks game sales engagement highlights. Highguard debuted in the top 10 in weekly active users on US Steam. Was top 20 in both US PlayStation and Xbox. I mean, but what about I mean, I can believe that because, to be fair, there was not many games that are on these. But I mean, but to be fair, it did have quite a few people on release day playing it. But then they lost like, what, 80-90% in the second week. And it's a free game, so the point of the game is to keep people playing, so they buy skins. Or they buy, whatever merchandise or, whatever in-game currency. Like, that's the idea they were going with. Sort of like Apex Legends. But the question is, why would you play this over Apex Legends? And they said it's from previous developers of Apex and Titanfall, so people were wanting a good game, but then this schlop came out. And people are like, oh, you're calling it slop. It's like, yeah, bland, boring game that loses 90% of its players, and just based off what you see, I mean, I guess this is supposed to look cool and everything, but yeah, you're looking at the characters and it's like they're just bland. Said that one really stings as was a lot of unreleased content I was looking forward to that I and other designers for Highguard. And that's also the problem. I feel like the developers are just being lied to by who knows, maybe game journalists or management. Maybe they're trying to please shareholders, but they're being let off a cliff. And a lot of these bad games have roadmaps also, just so the whatever investors are like, hey, don't jump off. We have plans, only to drop the plans eventually. Like I know Anthem did this. But yeah, like this is just par for the course. I don't know what I can say that other people haven't already said that's better. But if you take anything from this, just know Layoffs is not healthy. Like as many times as a company will be like, oh, yo, we're doing fantastic, or oh, you shouldn't care if the game fails. I mean, that's just journalists trying to run defense for just blatantly bad games. And there's no way they couldn't have known that this game would have just either, for the at most, flop, like be mid, but at worst flop because it was hyped up only to be just literally just like Concord, and go the way of Concord and literally have the same design flaws. Like every single flaw that Concord had, Highguard also had. And we also know that a couple of the developers that were over Concord, or like the head producers and all of them, flew over to Highguard. This game has a narrative director in a game that has no narrative. There is no story whatsoever. Like, maybe they wanted a single player, but yeah, good fucking luck. And I guess to their credit, it is a free game, but people want good games. Like people want more good games on the market than just slop. And a lot of these developers are taking to LinkedIn and being like, oh yeah, I'm off. Unfortunately, I've been fired. If you need this, that, and the other, I'm here, which makes sense. Like you're being laid off, you're being let go. So yeah, not surprising that this game failed. A lot of people were like, "Oh, well, it's failing because people want it to fail." It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy because people are thinking it's going to fail. It fails, and people are like, "Yeah, I told you so." And it's like, again, maybe you're incapable of looking at this and finding out and deciding why it will fail just based off the image. But I can tell you, right? And you probably won't like what you hear, but I'll tell you what you need to hear. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. Peace out.